Hey guys, Joe here at JP Details with part 2 of the world's most oxidized Evo 8 restoration. In part 1 we covered the full decontamination process to get the exterior ready for machine polishing, so if you haven't watched that video already, I would recommend you check it out. For those that have seen part 1, let's continue. As we saw in part 1, the depth of the paintwork suggests that we need to be on the careful side of machine polishing. This means we need to find the least most abrasive combination of polish and pad selection that is going to remove the oxidation and begin restoring the paintwork, whilst leaving enough paint behind on the Evo's bodywork. I've opted for a microfiber cutting disc on the Rupes LHR 15 machine polisher and Rupes Yellow Fine abrasive polish to initially test the paintwork to see how much oxidation I can remove. Most Mitsubishi Evo 8s, which include the white, yellow and red painted ones, are single stage paint. This means both the clear coat and colour coat are applied to the bodywork as one layer and not as two separate layers. This makes for an incredibly soft type of paintwork that is very easily marred or scratched. There is no metallic flake to single stage paintwork, it is absolutely solid in colour, which you will see shortly. With this type of paintwork we are not removing defects out of the utmost layers of the clear coat, we are removing a certain kind of defect which is the oxidation in the utmost layers of the colour coat. This is going to result in a lot of paint transfer onto the cutting and polishing pads. Whilst testing the first combination of finishing, polishing, cutting pad, I'm simply making sure I cover each area with a few passes with a relatively slow arm speed. I'm watching the paintwork through the polish for signs of oxidation removal, and I'm ensuring the temperature of the body panel is not becoming excessively hot. After the first test spot was completed, I buffed the polish residue from the paintwork and wiped down with IPA so I could inspect the true level of paint correction. I didn't notice any difference after the IPA wipe down, the results were simply amazing. I measured the depth of the paintwork in various areas and compared them with the ones I had taken before. I didn't notice much of a difference in the readings, they were perhaps a couple of microns less, which has to be expected when removing this kind of heavy oxidation from super soft single stage paintwork. I ended up machine polishing the whole of the bonnet and half of the roof before picking the camera back up. The only areas the Rupes machine polisher wouldn't get to are the tight curves by the air intake on the bonnet. There were also a few random patches of heavier oxidation dotted around which required additional passes to fully remove. Some of the edges and the panel gaps where I've been very careful with due to the paint always being thinner on the edges needed a little extra delicate machine polishing work to fully restore. Moving round to the passenger side of the Evo, and by now we had completed the initial soft cutting stage for the bonnet, roof and front wings. I'd become familiar with the paintwork and understood what it takes to remove the oxidation. Quite simply, it needed a good and thorough machine polish all over, with making sure I hit each area more than once with a relatively slow arm speed. Simply buffing the polish residue with a microfiber towel and then inspecting the paintwork at various angles highlighted any missed areas, which were then followed up with isolated machine polishing work. You should notice the microfiber cutting pad has now turned deep red in colour. This is due to the polish residue building up in the pad and obviously the paint transfer from the single stage paint. Managing the product residue in the microfiber pads was very simple, but even when the pads were excessively saturated, the oxidation was still being removed. But by giving the microfiber cutting pads a good wipe and clean with a microfiber cloth helped to keep product splatter to a minimum, reducing the cleanup that was required afterwards. An important part of managing the microfiber cutting pads was making sure the fibres stayed upright and not squashed down. This was achieved using a Chemical Guys pad brush. The smaller panels on the Evo's bodywork were machine polished using the same type of microfiber cutting pad and finishing polish. I'm using a Repes Mini Duetto 75 Bigfoot to get to these areas. I always find when using the Mini Bigfoot that it tends to cut quicker than the LHR 15 machine. This is more than likely due to a smaller pad covering a smaller area with more force being impacted on a smaller space. This meant I was constantly changing the speed of the machine to suit the types of areas I was machine polishing. I tended to keep the machine between speed setting 5 and 6, whereas the LHR 15 was speed setting 6 all the way. Just remember, this is after a soft cutting stage. We still need to refine the paintwork with a super soft polishing pad and ultra fine finishing polish for maximum gloss and depth of colour. Some of the tight areas around the indicator and side runners still need to be cut, which I'm going to be doing by hand as they are far too intricate for a machine polisher. This will be covered with video footage shortly. Moving round to the back of the Evo, which I'll be machine polishing using the Repes Mini Duetto Bigfoot, as the LHR 15 proved to be too big of a machine. I taped up the Mitsubishi and the Lancer badge as they are both metal or aluminium, which is far too delicate to machine polish around. The Evolution and FQ320 badge are actually rubber, so these will be fine to machine polish over, just not too aggressively. If this was my motor, I would opt to remove the badges, machine polish and then replace the badges. But as this is not my vehicle and not a requirement by the owner, I'm going to do my best with the badges on the car. These were later detailed out using Maguire's detailing swabs, which is demonstrated towards the end of the video. Again, it was a simple case of completing a good and thorough initial machine polish and then buff the residue with a microfiber towel. Inspect the results and then machine polish where required to make sure all oxidation was removed. The intricate areas were dealt with using a handheld cutting applicator and the same finishing polish. It was a case of finding a way to get the applicator right up close to the edges of the indicators whilst applying light to medium pressure. I made sure at all times that the only parts of the cutting applicator coming into contact with the paint were primed with polish. This paintwork being super soft, if you were to rub a dry or unprimed part of the applicator against the paintwork, it is going to mar. Polish acts as a lubricant as well as a source of abrasion to remove the oxidation from these tricky to get to areas. The door handles were treated in the same way using a handheld cutting applicator and finishing polish. The paint on some of the plastic areas, which included the door handles and wing mirrors, proved to have faded beyond the point of being fully restored. The soft cut and fine finish improved these areas very nicely and made them blend in with the rest of the glossy paintwork. The next area to treat by hand, because they are far too intricate for a machine polisher, were these tight grooves that ran down both of the sides. Again, it was a simple case of making sure the cutting applicator was primed with polish and all areas were given a good going over. Soft cutting stage complete, the unit lights were turned off and I inspected all areas of the paintwork for 100% oxidation removal. This was done using a ScanGrip 2 handheld LED light. I was checking my work as I made my way around the vehicle, but there were a few areas, particularly on the panel edges, where I opted to polish them by hand afterwards. Unfortunately, I didn't seem to record any footage from me checking the paintwork at this stage. Moving to the finishing stage, and I'll be using the Ruper's ultrafine finishing polish and ultrafine finishing pad to gloss the paintwork up to its maximum. A similar approach was taken in comparison to the soft cutting stage, which was to ensure all areas of paintwork were covered a few times with a relatively slow arm speed. I'm breaking down the abrasives in the polish to help squeeze every last drop of gloss from the paintwork. Managing the product residue in the finishing pad was exactly the same as the soft cutting stage, which was to periodically scrub the pad with a microfiber cloth and brush the pad with the Chemical Guys pad brush after each panel. I'll take this opportunity to mention how many cutting and finishing pads were used on the Evo. 3 cutting pads for the LHR15 and 3 finishing pads for the LHR15, 3 cutting pads for the Mini Duetto and 3 finishing pads for the Mini Duetto. Managing the product residue the best I could optimised each pad for financial efficiency. These pads aren't cheap. The LHR15 was used for the larger panels and the Mini Duetto was used for the tighter areas. I've got to say, finishing the paintwork was far more fun than removing the oxidation. It may not show it all that well in the footage, but the extra gloss being achieved was pretty spectacular. All of the areas that we saw being cut by hand were also finished by hand, using a soft handheld applicator and finishing polish. Nice and thorough and delicate to the touch, squeezed out a few extra drops of glossy goodness. A very rewarding stage of this detail after restoring the paintwork of oxidation. The very tight areas of the Evo 8, like the surrounds of the bonnet vents, were polished using the Meguiar's detailing swabs and Repez finishing polish. Other areas where I used this method to restore oxidation from very hard to get to areas were around the badges on the rear, side repeaters and door handles. I mentioned earlier that provided I made sure all areas were machine polished thoroughly, the IPA wipe down did very little in highlighting any missed areas in comparison to just inspecting the paintwork after buffing the polish residue with a microfiber towel. Nevertheless, if this car is going to stand the best chance of not fading again for a few years, it is going to need a ceramic coating. Just like after all things machine polishing related, we need to wipe down the paintwork with IPA to remove polish ores and residue, in order to form the perfect surface for last stage protection adhesion and maximum product bonding to the paintwork. Last but not least, a final inspection of the paintwork to make sure all areas are restored and nice and glossy. Lights off, scan grip 2 handheld out, and time to inspect my work. Happy days, it is ready for the ceramic coating, which will be covered in part 3 of the world's most oxidized Evo 8 restoration. As always, thank you for watching. Please drop the video a like and subscribe to the channel if you are not already. Please go and follow me on Facebook and Instagram, links in the description, or just search JP Details. I'll hopefully catch you in the next one.